All right, welcome everybody. It is week 3 of stop motion AI animation. I'm just going to share my slides really quickly, everybody in the class. So if you want to follow along, you can. And let me share my screen. All right. So as mentioned, we are in week 3 here. So we're already halfway through class. So next week will be our last week of class. This is kind of a short class, shorter than I usually do. We will still have the Q&A sessions after week 4, and depending on how much people want to like chat with me more, we might extend even another week or two. I'm teaching at ITP, I think, starting in the middle of March, so I'll probably like stop around then. But if people want to keep chatting, like I'm always down to meet up and discuss stuff over Zoom or whatever. So if there are like, if you're sort of like in the middle of a project, you want to sort of ask me questions, like please feel free to DM me or set up some time. So this week we're going to go mostly through the Eden API. I know everyone probably over the past 2 weeks has been a little bit like, these are cool, but like I want more control. So this is the week we're going to start to look at controls, which means we're going to spend a lot of time in the first hour of our class just generating images and kind of fine tuning and dialing in our settings for generating images. Some of you might already be familiar with that with Flux, other people might not, but we'll spend a little bit of time just doing that. And then we'll spend the second hour of the class kind of expanding that into generating animations from that. So yeah, so this will be mostly a working class, which will be, I think, be fun. But there will be lots of questions that people will probably want to explore different ways to use these tools to generate the images they want. And to be honest, this class will be a little chaotic. Like I think the videos we're going to output will be a little bit interesting, just depending on the settings we set up. And that's kind of the goal, is to figure out like what the right balance of the settings is. So I will say, last week I did not record the second half of class. So I spent Tuesday sort of re-recording that session. If you were in class, I did actually cover a couple other things in that recording. So I just want to play through that one very quickly. For example, I kind of figured out how some of the audio settings work a little bit better inside of Dforum. So like the last maybe 5-10 minutes of that class kind of cover some of the audio setting tools. So this is something I was able to make using the audio settings where the beat actually did match correctly, like that sort of thing. So if you were playing around and didn't get those settings, like I do have a couple notes in there in that video if you're interested. This week, we're going to look at like what I'm kind of describing as like rotoscoping. So we've kind of like every week have had some sort of analog for an analog animation process. And this one I'm kind of thinking more as like the rotoscoping process. And then also like, as always the case with these things, I'm like, oh, I know what rotoscoping is. It's when you outline stuff in animation, and then seeing what other people are calling rotoscoping did not match up with what I was calling rotoscoping, which is fine. I think a lot of these terms are a little bit like flexible in terms of how they work. And also this is completely wrong in terms of a definition for it. Let's just say this is like using live action footage to control an animation, or to like feed an animation. Some like this has been a long running thing within the animation industry. There's a pretty cool little video I found on Vox that is basically like the history of particularly like the work done by Max Fleischer. This would have been like the teens or 20s, 30s maybe. I forget exactly when this all started. But it kind of goes through this particular video or this particular animation called Minnie the Moocher, and how all of the dancing motion was literally derived from like old animation or old videos of Cab Calloway. So basically sort of like mapped his whole body movement to the movement of these dancers in this animation. So we won't watch the entire video, but if you are interested, like definitely check that out, because it's a pretty fascinating process of like, you know, sort of getting the idea for this and that sort of thing. So we can kind of see like from me all the way back then, like we've sort of been building upon that technique and those sort of things. The reason I think of rotoscoping as like outlining someone is that when I was, you know, when I was in school, like I think probably like right when I got into college, like this film from Richard Linklater called Waking Life came out. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but basically this was like they shot this film completely on like old shitty DV cameras, And then they used a process by this animator by the name of, I think it's Bob Sabiston. I forget, I don't know if that's exactly how to pronounce his last name. He had this whole like computer technology kind of set up to basically animate those live sessions. So you'll see they sort of had this doll that was sort of like attached to this car, filmed that, and then they rotoscoped over top of it this animation. And Waking Life kind of was like Flash era. It kind of has this certain look and feel to it. But when I, started in school, like that was everyone was talking about this film because like it was crazy. They like rotoscope the entire film and like use some technology to sort of make that happen. You can see it's literally on like a very shitty DV cam to shoot all those scenes, and they like rotoscoped everything. So I think rotoscoping is like one of those things that comes in and out of favor like every 20 years or so. And I think we're kind of at this interesting point now where like AI tools can kind of match that thing. And you probably have seen this like funny meme of our spaghetti dancers here. I feel like this is like, I don't know, everyone now makes spaghetti dancing animations for their AI, like sort of like, look at how great our tool works, right? So this is clearly not like full on rotoscoping, but it is like a similar technique, or the idea is that, we use live video to sort of map the positions of the body, and then we can use AI to sort of map over top of that. So we're gonna look at something kind of like that this week. We'll probably look at that a little bit this week and then a little bit more next week as well. The rotoscoping we're going to do in this class is really going to be using that image to image technique. And we've sort of talked about image to image every week for the past 2 or 3 weeks now. But this week, we're going to really dig into like the details of image to image and different techniques to get that, like, to basically use the underlying image as a structural process, or a structural like sort of way to help our image to image process. So we'll kind of like look at this and we'll dig into that. There are a couple of things I want to talk about before we get into that process. Because this is the first time we're really dealing with using open source diffusion tools where we sort of have access to all the parameters, right? So Midjourney is not an open source tool. It's just their model. They give you some tools to sort of access things, right? Like using the variation, whether it's strong or subtle. Last week, we looked at Deform, which there is technically an open source version of that, but like the studio tool that we looked at kind of obfuscates away a lot of the different settings. So this week, we're going to like dive into those settings and kind of play with stuff. An important part of that is we're not going to jump to videos and animations just yet. So we're going to spend this first hour really sort of figuring out the images. Once we dial in a single image, then we will expand that to videos. And that's really, really important, especially as we look at the tools we're going to use today. Because if you don't really figure out what you want to do on the single image level, if you just start to jump right to video, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money sort of generating these videos. Because essentially what we're going to do is for every video, we're going to generate a single, or every frame in a video, we're going to generate a single image. And that time will take a little bit of time. With the tool we're going to use today, it's actually quite slow, but also it uses a lot of credits. And that's just, kind of the nature, excuse me, of these tools. Is video is quite expensive. And even the way we're doing it is almost like in some ways more expensive, but we have more control over the individual frames. So the most important thing is we're going to really spend a lot of time like honing our single image prompts and some of our settings, and then we're going to move to video. Before we do that, I also want to talk a little bit about like there are different types of models. And when I mean a model, I mean a AI image tool that does something. So in this case, it's going to be generating images, right? So we'll feed in a text prompt and get out an image. Over the past 3-ish years, there's been a lot of changes within what models we use to generate images. But as we'll see, maybe not this week, but definitely next week, every model kind of has different sets of features, capabilities, that sort of thing. And if you've never heard these discussed before, I think it's helpful to hear them talked about now, because there are many, many more. Like 2.5 years ago, there was basically 1 or 2. There was like Stable Diffusion, and that was it. And now there's like probably 20 or 30. And it feels like there's more every day. So I'll talk about just briefly about a couple different models and why people still use them. So the first one is what we'll usually refer to as SD 1.5. That stands for Stable Diffusion 1.5. There were precursors to this. There was 1.4, there was 1.3. Most people now have sort of like settled on 1.5. In the world of AI, it's quite old. It's 2.5 years old now, which is like kind of crazy that people still use it. But but it is still very popular, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is, as we'll get to maybe next week, there's a lot of tools that are built specifically for SD 1.5 and were never built for later versions. So in particular, there's a thing called Animate Diff that we'll probably look at next week. And Animate Diff really only works with SD 1.5. People have tried to make new versions. There are other hacks around it, but like really the original version of Animate Diff only worked with SD 1.5. The other reason people like SD 1.5, which gets into the weird world of the internet, is it was trained on a lot of like, how do I say this without sounding like an asshole? It was trained on a lot of material that was not censored. So there was a lot of pornography in that model. There was a lot of other data that was eventually removed by Stable Diffusion in later versions. So the internet, all the weird recesses of the creepy internet like SD 1.5, because it can generate a wide range of images, including things that we probably don't want to generate in this class. But that's still a reason why SD 1.5 is still quite popular. Yeah. I would prefer to think about Animate Diff as the only reason, but to be honest, it's not the only reason. So Animate Diff, or sorry, SD 1.5 is still quite popular. And we will see it pop up probably when we look at it next week with Animate Diff. The other sort of more recent model is SDXL. It's not really that much newer. It's now like 18 months old. It came out in July 2023. The XL stands for literally it's a bigger model. It has more parameters inside of it. It also, I should have mentioned SD 1.5 generates images at 512 by 512 natively. There are ways around that, but by default, it wants to generate 512 by 512. SDXL is 1024 by 1024. And it also works better at other sizes. SD 1.5 has some issues with non-square images and other things. One of the downsides of this as we start to look at more tools is that SDXL, specifically in Animate Diff, like a lot of these additional tools kind of lag behind for SDXL. So particularly in the Animate Diff world, if you want to make animations using that tool, SD 1.5 is still really the go-to. Now that we're sort of in 2025, people are sort of starting to adapt some of these tools for brand new models, which we'll talk about just next. But in reality, it's like SDXL is still quite popular because it does generate pretty high quality images. And there were a lot of open source tools built on top of that platform or on top of that model. The new kid on the block, or like probably the more popular one today, is a model called Flux. It's kind of the new stability, although there is new stability models coming out. Basically, a bunch of people left stability to form a lab called Black Forest Labs, and they put out Flux, I want to say about 5 or 6 months ago now. And it's kind of overtaken what I think is like the predominant space of open source AI image generation. And in fact, this is the model we're going to use today. It's open source, although I will say like their licenses are kind of weird. If you have like a very litigious client, Flux might not be your best solution because technically the dev model, which is what we're going to use today, is technically non-commercial, but lots of platforms allow you to use it for commercial purposes. The licenses are a little funky and it gets kind of in the weeds. For this class, it'll be totally fine, but if you were to like work for a client and they wanted to make sure everything was above board to use these for commercial tools, Flux might be a little bit of a weird one. People like it because it's really good at photorealism. As we'll see, most of the AI community is very interested in photorealism. I personally am not. And that, in fact, Flux can actually struggle sometimes with non-photorealistic stuff, as we'll look through when we generate some images today. There are ways around that, but it's generally a little bit of a more challenging model to work with. The other thing I should mention is Flux generally wants really long prompts. So whereas SDXL and SD 1.5 could get away with pretty short prompts, Flux definitely shines if there's a very, very long prompt. For this class, it's probably fine if you just play around a little bit. There are tools out there that maybe I'll link to after class to help you generate longer prompts. But in general, like Flux tends to do better with that. The other challenge with Flux, although this is starting to be less of an issue, is a lot of these additional plugin models, which we'll talk about later today, like control nets. It took a little while for them to come out. And now they're available and now they work fairly well. Maybe not as well as SDXL or SD 1.5 models do, but they're still working pretty well for what we're going to need them for today. So just be aware that there are some downsides to using this newish model versus other things. There is also SD 3.5, which is sort of the newest model from Stability. It is definitely not as popular as Flux. There's probably like some weird political reasons for why that is. Um, I think it probably works as well as Flux does in terms of realism, quality. Again, it also wants longer prompts. Um, and the nice thing about Stability is Stability put out when they released this model also control nets with it. But there are other tools that are not as easily plugged in with SD 3.5. Um, I very rarely see people building off SD 3.5 tools. Um, Again, there's lots of reasons for why that is. Mostly that people have kind of turned their back on Stability as a company, and everyone's kind of picked up Flux as their like open source savior, which is always problematic. So you might come across some SD 3.5 tools, but it's a lot less likely. You will generally come across more Flux tools these days. So today we're going to play with some image-to-image tools, and we're going to mostly use a company called Eden to access them. So if everyone wants to go to eden.art, I'll paste this link in our channel. You should, if you sign up for the first time with your like Google account, I believe you should get like 90 free credits, which is really cool. 90 free credits will be plenty for this class. And you might get kicked to eden.art and then you need to log in, and then it will try to either send you to eden.art or beta.eden.art. If you can go to beta.eden.art, the link that's in the chat, that's probably the best place to go to. The history of this class is I taught a class like this in December of last year, like just like an in-person class in LA. And I had built out this whole like really nice workflow with their original Eden tools, which were built in SDXL. And then they kind of like deprecated a lot of the original Eden.art, and now they're pushing everyone to beta. So over the past couple weeks, I've like rebuilt this entire thing on the beta platform. If anyone wants to use the SDXL version, I probably have tools that still work with it. But Eden is kind of moving everyone to this beta tool, which is nicer in some ways and worse in other ways for me. Probably less of an issue for you and more of an issue for me because their APIs are kind of all over the place now. But Eden, for anyone that's like familiar with sort of the history of AI art, Eden is run by Gene Kogan and Xander Steenbrugge, who are very like early people involved in sort of the AI art community. And they're good folks. And like this is all based on a lot of open source tools. And they've done a lot of nice things that make this easily accessible for people. And the key thing for me is the free credits mean you guys can play around with it without having to pay more money. So like for today's class, like you'll basically be able to do stuff on your free credits to generate images, get your parameters set up. And then you'll basically use my API credits for at least the first animation or two you make. And you're going to see if you like the process. If you like the process, then you might want to pay for their tools to get your own API token. I think to get API tokens, you have to pay another $30 a month, which is pretty traditional for these tools. But I think you actually get more credits through Eden than you would through other places. So I think you actually like this is a good value for what they offer. But at least for today, you can kind of play around and see if you like it before paying for it. So I believe if everyone logs in, you should see like 90 up here as like 90 free credits or something. Is that right? Hope they didn't change that on me.
I see 20.
You see 20? 20? Is that what we get? Okay, they've changed that. All right. Well, 20 is still plenty for what we're going to do today. Well, we'll see. Okay. So 20 should get you like 10 images, which is fine. Maybe not perfect. I can also maybe help with, I don't know, getting credits to people and like or doing some stuff here live for people if anyone wants it. You can already see behind the scenes like one of my API tools is running because I'm generating animation. But what we're going to do for this group will like basically like let you generate some images yourself. So before we jump into that, like let me go through all the settings that are here. So if you're on this page, you'll see like at the top here, it says create an image advanced. This is their Flux model. If you go to at the top here and just click on create, you'll see they have a bunch of different tools. So they've got create an image advanced, generate an image from text using Flux, create an image fast, which is using another model called Flux Flux is fine. It's just like the quality is lower for a faster image. It's kind of a weird trade-off. They also have this other one in our image, which is create an image using SDXL. And that uses sort of their classic SDXL model. So there are other options here. If you deviate from my tools, like the challenge here is that you have to generate every image by hand instead of using an API to generate the images, which is just very annoying for animations. But you can play around in here. And if you do pay for like more credits through them, they have a bunch of really nice, interesting animation tools that I probably won't cover in this class, but there's some cool stuff in here if you want to play around. And maybe if we have time at the end of class, I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. But there's lots of cool tools in here. And they make a lot of their own tools that are slightly different than other things and are really good usage. So we're going to go back to the create an image advanced. And then the key thing for this is if you move over here to the left-hand side where the settings button is, just click on that, and that's going to open a ton of images or a ton of options. And we'll go through each of these options sort of one by one so you can sort of know what each thing is doing. And I've got some samples and examples of various things as well in the slides. So as I mentioned, like there's a couple different options for image generation within Eden. The one we're going to focus on today is the Create an Image Advanced. This uses a model called Flux Dev. Flux Dev is technically kind of like the medium model of Flux. There's one called Flux Pro that you literally can't use unless you use like Flux, the Black Forest Labs API. That's like their highest version model, but it's also quite expensive to use. And then Flux Schnell is like their fast model, which means it generates images faster, but the quality tends to be a little bit lower. And I would say your diversity of your images is actually like quite constrained. That's actually the bigger issue I have with Flux Schnell, which is that the images still look good, but you get less diversity in your images because of how that model works. Just be aware of that. So if you want to like just have your version of Eden open, we'll kind of go through some of these different panels here. So the top part of the panel, which is always open, has describe an image. That's your prompt. So we'll talk a little bit more about prompts, but basically like this, you should describe your image as much as you can. So SD 1.5 and I believe SDXL used to have like a token limit where it'd be like you can only put in like maybe 50 words. With Flux, you can put in a lot of words. I think it's like 500 or something. It's like pretty crazy how much of a prompt you could put in. We're going to skip the size dimensions because what we're actually going to do is we're going to upload an image to Eden and use the uploaded image as the size for the dimensions. So you can kind of skip this part for now. We're also going to skip the proportions or dimensions here. So by default, if you weren't going to upload an image, you would have the option of doing a square image or a portrait or landscape image at 16 by 9. Because we're going to upload an image, what will happen is the uploaded image, the proportions from that uploaded image and the dimensions from that image are going to be used for the output. That's important to know because if you upload like a 4K image, it will like kind of complain or it might even like error out on you. So in general, something around like 1920, 1080 is fine. 720 is fine. Like those sort of sizes will be good. The other thing we have an option for here is this number of images. So if you click on this, you'll see you have 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x. You can generate up to 4 images at one time. The downside of this is when we move this to an animation, if you generate 4 images and you like the third image more than the first image, the animation process isn't really set up to grab that third image. We'll talk about that when we get to seeds. So I would probably recommend leaving it at 1. It's also going to keep your credits lower. The more images you generate, the more credits it costs. It's for now just a little bit safer to just generate 1 image at a time, in part because we can grab the seed value from that image, which we'll talk about in a second, and actually be able to utilize that. So if you do want to generate more than 1 image, maybe to curate a selection of things when you go to animation, you certainly can. It's just going to burn through credits faster. So maybe if you want to do that, you should sign up for your own Eden account, and then I can show you how to grab an API key and then use it yourself. So for now, for everyone, just please keep it to 1 because it's going to make everyone's image generations a little bit faster when we're all using my account. Okay, so the starting image, so if we come back over here, you'll see there's this section that says add a starting image. This is where we're going to want to upload our image. And the way to do this is you can just click on the section, click on the little arrow. That's going to open this and it's going to turn this on. And what we want to do is want to upload an image to this space. Now, what I recommend you do is take like a screenshot of one of the frames from your animation, maybe something in the middle, maybe the very first frame. It doesn't really matter as long as there's something in the scene. if it's like if your image is like or your video is like fading in or something, make sure there's like an image in your frame that you upload to this. So I'm just gonna grab one of these and upload it. Because I already have some of these here. So I'm gonna grab one. Where did my screenshot go? Cool. So I have this screenshot here. The other thing to note is if you're on a Mac like me, it has high res monitors. So when I screenshotted this, it actually was like 2x the size of my video, which can complicate things a little bit. So if you can make your video the same or make your screenshot the same size as your video. So you can just drag this into the space here for upload image.
Should we be seeing your screen, Derek?
Oh, are you not seeing my screen?
I think it just stopped a couple minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Oh, no, I'm still seeing it.
Oh, that's weird. I'm not.
Just in
Huh.
case.
Same for me.
Cool. Let me
Oh.
It's working. Sorry.
It must just be me. I'm sorry.
No, all good, all good. Cool. Okay. Everyone see Flux now? Is that right? Okay, cool. Great. So this section here, where add a starting image, make sure this is on, and then really quickly just take a screenshot of one of your images and upload it here to the section.
Derek, should we choose a photo that we also have the prompt for? Or are we like making a new prompt?
No, we're gonna make a new prompt. Like basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the underlying video and kind of like add a new style over top of it is kind of what I'm gonna do. We'll kind of get everything set up and then we'll add in prompts and we'll start to play with our images. But it's kind of easier if I go through all the steps first, so you can kind of decide what you want to do, and then we'll generate some images and come back to it. So starting image, we're going to upload this. So you should see your thumbnail here. If you want to remove that image and upload something different, you can hit the X here or hit the clear all uploads and just drag in a new image. At the bottom here is this thing called AI strength. I've got a bunch of slides to go over this. This is essentially the denoising process. So we've talked about denoising and how basically denoising adds a certain amount of noise to the image and then removes it. This is basically how much denoising do we want to do. So if you set it to 1, that means add full noise back to the image, which more or less means your underlying image is kind of obliterated and it kind of does something new over top of it. Now, with Flux in particular, like a little bit of the color does come through. So like my image will still have like some color range from this, even if it's set to 1. If you used SDXL before and have done a lot of this, Flux and SDXL work differently with denoising. And I've got some images to show that. So maybe let's jump into that now. Usually for like SDXL, you might set it to something like 0.75. What we will see with Flux is that's actually too low of a value. Basically, like we will not get anything new over top of that. So let me show you what I mean by that. So these are some samples I made earlier today. So my prompt was a man made of flowers, floral illustration, bright and cheery. The flowers are bright pinks, reds, whites, and greens. So when I set my denoise strength, or what's called AI strength inside of Eden, all these places label them all differently, which is very confusing. I may call it denoise strength, but they're called AI strength. If you set this to 0.75, see how really all it does is kind of like make his shirt made of flowers. This is because we're only adding a little bit of noise to this image, and then removing that noise means we mostly keep the same image, right? So his arm structure and other things are basically the same. As is always the case, it always turns people white because it's what these models are trained on, a lot of white people. But you'll see that his shirt kind of picks up this prompt more than anything else does. If we move this to 0.8, I should also mention not every image is going to look the exact same. There is a randomness to this process and what's called random seed values. If I were to generate 50 images using this exact same prompt, I would probably see something similar, but his face might change. I might see more flowers, less flowers. Some flowers might appear like on his skin tone or something. So likewise, when I move to 0.8, you'll see like flowers do start to appear, but they kind of appear outside of him. And you'll see now he's got a short sleeve shirt instead of a long sleeve shirt. Like if I were to generate again 100 images like this, I might get some of the flowers on his shirt or some of them on his face. But in general, you can kind of see we're moving a little bit further away from this image, but we're not still really hitting this prompt. At 0.85, we get some creepy images. His face becomes flowers, but his face still looks through. But you'll see again, if you even look at his body is kind of changing, right? His hand is no longer sticking out. It's now kind of become his arm. You can kind of almost think of this as like squinting your eyes and blurring this image and then trying to redraw that image from like the squint, you can kind of see how it's coming up with these images. 0.9, in this case, I get like an illustrative figure somehow. Again, kind of probably luck of the draw for these cases, but you'll even see his body position is very, very different. And at 0.95, I get almost a completely different image. Some of the color tones are probably the same if you were squint and blur your eyes, but this is probably closer to what the prompt is, right? Like this is what I would want the prompt to be based on what I put in here. So the challenge with all this stuff is balancing out the like how much do I want to obliterate the original image and how much do I want to have it match the prompts. The further your prompt is from the original input image, the more of a challenge it's going to be for the model to sort of keep both things together. There are some additional tools we'll look at in a minute that allow us to kind of mix and match those things. But in general, the idea is like the stronger your AI strength value is, the less of the original image you see, and the less like you are to keep some of that underlying structure. And then when I move it to 1.0, I get almost a completely different image. And this is kind of what happens when you set it to 1.0. So for most cases, I would say 0.9 and 0.85 are generally what you want to sort of stick around for Flux. If your images are not that, or if your prompt is not that different from what your input image is, you might be able to get away with a little bit of a higher value, like 0.8, 0.75 even. But in general, you kind of want to stick to this range, even though in these particular images, they're not as like good looking. If I were to run this 50 times, I might get a good image that does represent what I want. And in those cases, I would actually like pull up the seed value. We'll go through that whole process in a minute. But in general, like this is kind of a good value range to look for. So let's go back to Eden really quickly. And what I'll do is I'll set my value here in AI strength. I'll set it to 0.9. The other thing I mentioned is we want to use this uploaded image as the input dimensions for both pixel size as well as proportions. So to do that, we want to check this box or switch this toggle, whatever you want to call it. So as long as this is on, it's bright white. That means this image is going to provide the input size and dimensions for our output image. Below this, we have this other thing called use starting image as shape guide. This is technically what we call a control net. So control nets are control nets allow us to actually control the underlying structure of an image, right? So we can almost think about denoise as how much of the colors should we keep, whereas control nets are how much of the structure should we keep. And there are many different control nets. These work using a additional AI model. So when I talked about some AI models are not as well supported by other AI models like control nets, this is kind of what I was referring to. So if you look at SD 1.5, SD 1.5 has like 12 control nets that are available for it. With Flux, we've got like 5 or 6. Now those 5 or 6 are still pretty good and will work great for us. But knowing if you want to use a particular control net model, you might need to use a different image generation model. It's kind of worth knowing. There's some links here to the types of different control nets that are available to you. So if you click on the SDXL one, we can kind of see what the images are. Actually, maybe it's here in SD 1.5. Yeah. So this link has some good examples of what they look like. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see here there's control net with canny edge. If you guys know anything about machine vision, canny edge is like an edge detection system. So this is kind of an example of like you upload this bird and then you can outline the shapes. And in this case, especially with canny edge, you find that it's like very good at replicating the same shapes, but here you can kind of see the colors are different, right? So I can generate different colored birds because it's using this outline, this sort of almost color in the lines kind of material to actually influence the output of the image. There's different types of line networks. Some of them generate different types of images. I actually don't think a lot of these are even supported by Flux yet. There's a lot of like scribbly ones, that sort of thing. A very common one that people use is if you have humans in your images. A thing like a human pose detection system is good. This basically creates coordinates for the different positions of the body. So you can kind of see if this is the input image, you'll see that here we get the shoulders, you know, the elbows, the arms, the body, and some of the head as well. This is great because let's say you just want to take this body figure. This is sort of like classic rotoscoping. You just want to take this person's figure and how their body is positioned, and you want to change the entire image. So in this case, they're kind of taking this model and turning him into a chef. But you're going to keep the body position pretty easily here. The other one I want to get to was depth. So depth is another good one where if your image has a lot of depth in it, say it's either like a architectural photo or maybe there's a person as well. This allows you to keep some of the depth mapping. So you can sort of influence the image with the depth map. So you can kind of see here, like the actual image itself is quite different. But the poses are there and kind of the organic shapes of this is there. This kind of differs a little bit from the pose detection system, whereas how you interpret this pose is a little bit different, right? You could still think like maybe the arm is thinner, or like in this case, you can actually see it here. This arm is quite thin, but then when you make an astronaut, the arm gets a little bit thicker, right? Whereas the depth one actually kind of maps a little bit more to the actual shapes. So that's good to keep in mind. I personally tend to use the pose detection and the depth system the most. Those tend to be the most popular or the most useful for me. If I have for sure have a person, I'll tend to use the pose system. If I have kind of an image that's maybe a mix of pose or like more depth mappy kind of things, then I will use the depth map. There are other ones in here. And in fact, if you look at Flux, if we turn this on, use starting image as a shape guide, you'll see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there is canny, there is depth, there's line art, which is probably a little bit of a smoother version compared to canny. One of the downsides of canny is if you have very photographic images, it picks up texture very well. So you might want to use something like line art, which would maybe simplify those things. Soft lines is kind of the same thing. Here's our pose detection system, and then scribble. So, you know, between canny, line art, head, and scribble, they're all kind of outline models. And you might just want to play with those to figure out what outlines work best for you. But I tend to lean toward the human pose and the depth system the most. Those are kind of the two that I go with more frequently than not. So this is going to be helpful for us because, as we saw, when we make our AI strength settings higher, we kind of lose some of the image. So what we can do is we actually kind of bring some of the structure of the image back in by using this, this control net preprocessor. Now, this also has its own strength values. You can think about this almost as like a voting influence. How much, as these models sort of work, like how much influence do each of these things have on the system? If you turn it down, it's going to have like a subtle influence. If you crank it up, it's going to have a lot of influence. And I tend to find that I find values sort of in the middle to be the best. It just depends on how much influence you want that image to have. So I've got some examples here of this. So we've got two videos here, and this one has a lower control net value, and this one has a higher control net value. And you'll kind of see in this one, we tend to get a lot less faces and a lot less bodies, even though I fed it in a body image, whereas this one has more bodies and more faces, while still being pretty abstract. So again, there's a lot of nuance in these tools, and a lot of these parameters overlap with each other in sometimes really challenging ways. So you kind of have to dial in and play with these a little bit to get the right values. So in this case, I kind of like the control net of 0.65 versus 0.3. Again, depending on how different your prompt is from the input images, you might want to turn this up to keep some of the structural influence while turning denoise higher to like have more of the prompt overtake things, that sort of thing. It's a bit of a challenge to find the balance here. So I'll leave this at like 0.65, 0.7, and maybe I'll use depth for this image because my image has this guy. So I could use open pose. I could use outlines. The challenge with outlines is that, you know, I'll get some of the shirt textures, which maybe I don't want. Whereas a pose or depth system will give me a little bit more of a softer image while still maintaining some of the shapes. We are going to skip over the two trained model sections. These are, if you're familiar with LoRa's, those are essentially LoRa tools. Eden supports actually two LoRa's. I won't cover this today because that's like a whole other class in and of itself, but I actually probably will teach something like that. I think the next class I'm going to teach will be on training LoRa's. It's kind of what I do as my day job, so I'm pretty knowledgeable about LoRa's, both in video and images. So if you are interested in that material, I do have some tutorials today, like already up on how to use those. So if you are interested in using them, they're good, but I definitely like more advanced than I want to cover in this class, because we really just want to focus on animations. The last thing is or I guess maybe not, the second to last thing is there's this other section here called use a style image. I think this is somehow doing something that's called an IP adapter, which is basically like it will pull the visual information out of the image you upload and then generate a prompt based on that, and then use that to change your output image. I didn't know IP adapters for Flux existed yet. Actually, I do know there's one exists, so they're probably using that, but it's bad. That's the other downside I would say of this one is, in my experience, this style upload doesn't really work as well as I want it to. For SDXL or SD 1.5, they're much, much better, and maybe we'll look at that next week when we talk about Comfy. This one I find a little janky and a little like poor. It doesn't really do exactly what we want it to do. So for example, we'll skip over this slide. If anyone's interested in IP adapters, I've got a whole like lesson on that, but we'll skip over that slide because what I did for this example was I uploaded this image, this Gustav Klimt image, and I was kind of hoping it would like paint all the characters like this. And instead what kind of happened is it just became the background for these images, which again, I think it's just a downside of this particular model, or like the way this IP adapter works with Flux. So I might recommend skipping that one. You're welcome to play with it and see if you get any good results out of it. But in my experience, Flux's IP adapter that's available today, which is what they're using, is not the best. And this is kind of a cool image, but if it isn't what you expected, then it can be, you might get some sort of chaotic results. I also noticed it tended to eliminate my characters a lot, and I just got these backgrounds that were that. Which again, not exactly what I was looking for. That one's okay, but the other frames are pretty bad. So your mileage may vary with this. If you want to play with it, you can. And again, in this case, you upload an image that is sort of a stylistic image, and then you can feed a strength value into it as well. The last section here is our seed and steps values. Seed, steps, and prompt conditioning. These are, again, pretty common settings inside of Flux. Seed is something we'll look at in just a minute. Basically, there's a certain randomization that is applied to all the noise. And when you set a fixed seed, the noise is always the same. So what I generally will do for animations is I'll generate without applying a seed value. When I get an image I like, we'll copy the seed value from that and then apply that to our animation. Theoretically, what that will do is that we'll keep our images consistent throughout our animation, because it's using the same noise generation. It's not actually how it really works, but it's a little bit better than just generating random seed values for every image. We'll look at that in just a second. Steps, this is how many steps we go through that denoising iteration process. I believe Flux is generally between 25 and 35. You can kind of play with these values and see what works best for you. I think I'm often using 30. One of the things to know about steps is that this is at a speed cost. If you turn this down quite low, you'll get a low quality image, but it will generate faster. If you crank this up, you'll get a higher quality image, but it'll be slightly slower. And I will say Eden is slow, just in terms of image generation. I think because they're trying to save money and again giving you free credits and stuff. So it is a little bit slower than other tools where they're probably using really fast GPUs at a higher cost. So just be aware of that. Prompt conditioning. This is kind of a crazy one. Flux uses what's called a CFG, or a conditioning score. Basically, what I would say is if you have a shorter prompt, you should turn your prompt conditioning up. If you have a more complicated and longer prompt, you should turn your prompt conditioning down. This is kind of unique to Flux, although SD 3.5 added something similar. Essentially, this is how strong your prompt is compared to sort of the internal models tooling and that sort of thing. So if you turn this down, it's going to use your prompt as more of an influence. If you turn this up, it's going to use sort of the model's own internal system to generate a better prompt and generate better images. So if your prompt is short, you want to make this higher. If your prompt is long, you want to make it lower. That's kind of the balance between those two. Okay, so we've now gone through every parameter inside of these tools. So now we're just going to spend a little bit of time, maybe 20 minutes, just generating images. So all of you have 20 credits and it looks like each image costs about 2 credits to generate. So just beware, you're going to be able to make about 10 images on your free credits. And that's fine. Maybe dial in your image settings a little bit, and whatever is your best image. What I'll sort of do is show you how to like get those parameters out of your images. So I'm just going to go ahead in here, and I'm just going to generate some images. So I'm going to I'm going to copy my prompt from here. We'll cover this in a second, but when you generate an image, there's this little ellipses menu. You can click on this, and you can see view details. And that's going to pull up your prompt as well as all the parameters. We're going to need the parameters out of this in a minute, but for now, I'm just going to use this prompt. And I'm just going to paste this in here. So I'm going to generate one image with this prompt. I've got my starting image in here. I'm going to kind of obliterate this image. Let's do 0.85. I'm going to use the depth control net. I'm going to skip the style image. I'm going to skip the seeds. I'll leave the step set. Let's do 30. And then because my prompt isn't really that long, I'm going to turn up my prompt conditioning. Let's do 3. Oh, that's the wrong thing to change. That was 0.65. I'm going to set my prompt conditioning to like 3.5. So once I have all my settings in here, I'm just going to go ahead and hit create. That's going to add this sort of blank image, and it's going to then start to generate my image. I find this takes about 20 to 30 seconds. So at this point, like I would recommend you start doing the same, like kind of put in a prompt, kind of play with similar settings to me maybe, and generate an image and see if you like it. And then maybe you change your prompt a little bit if you don't like the image. Maybe you change some of your settings if you think things are a little bit too not giving you the image you like. And then I would say just do it for 10 images until you get like an image you like. So maybe we can take a little break now. I'm happy to hang out and just answer people's questions as you generate images. Let's come back in like 20 minutes. So we'll come back at like let's come back at 15 after. Hopefully you've generated at least an image you like the direction of, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, finish up, and I'd like to ask you a couple quick questions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So feel free to just start generating images in Flux. If you don't like the 10 images you get and you feel like you're liking this tool and want to pay for it, you can obviously pay for it and get more credits. I think you get some like 4,000 credits for $30 a month, which is pretty nice. We'll burn through credits in this class, but that's because I'm going to show you how to do animations and stuff with it. But yeah, so let's come back at 15 after, and we'll pick up from like the image you like, and we'll turn those into animations. Cool. Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Derek. So, just a few quick questions. Obviously, I'm working with my students right now with Comfy, and this seems like a slightly more sandboxed version of that. Does that mean it's more like user interface to like with pull down menus, but it doesn't. Would you say this offers anything that Comfy doesn't? Like smooth workflows for something special? Like if you had a bunch of students who were already like really into Comfy, how would you?
Just use Comfy. Just use Comfy.
Just
Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thank you. And I noticed that both Civitai and Eden allow you to train LoRa's.
Yep.
Is there one that you'd recommend if the students are training LoRa's to use with Comfy?
Civitai is cheaper, so that'd be my recommendation. The nice thing about Eden is you can use LoRa's directly in their own tools like this. Like there's like a user trained model and then select from there. So if you're gonna go to a Comfy, I think Civitai is cheaper and the way to go. I think Eden's trainer is quite nice and generates really good LoRa's, but you also need to pay like $30 a month to be able to export those LoRa's. So it's just kind of not worth it in that way if you're just gonna try to get stuff into Comfy.
Okay. So I'm gonna be starting basically this tomorrow, having my students start to collect images for LoRa's. I saw on your slide it said 10 to 100 images for a LoRa. Is more than that not good? Or
More is great, but it's not necessary. I would say like usually my recommendation for LoRa's is 5 to 40 images. The more images you have, the better off you are, assuming they're of good quality images, right? It's sort of like this, like you have to find the balance between good images that all look coherently similar stylistically versus just jamming in more crap, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
do I want a painting that looks like, I don't know, Gustav Klimt's work? Great. Then like I can collect 20 images of high quality Gustav Klimt work, but I don't want to go and grab random images that kind of look like his work, but not really, because the LoRa will be trained differently based on that.
Do you say you'll be speaking about LoRa training next week?
We won't really cover it next week, but I do have some links to tutorials and stuff on that sort of thing. So I'll send you those as well. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So I'm having the students do an image scraping assignment where they have to collect a lot of images.
Cool.
And I guess maybe I'm just thinking in a very 2016 kind of way right now, but I want them to collect like 1,000 images and almost like train a GAN. Like is that just like
That's overkill for LoRa. And in fact, I think Civitai has like a 500 image limit for how many images you can upload to their LoRa. I think Eden's is like 100 images max. So most LoRa's are generally trained on smaller data sets. Yeah, so I would.
you think of
Yeah.
any of, for me, I'm still, I guess, stuck in this mindset of like, I got to collect a lot of images so that there's a lot of diversity in the data set so that there isn't like the biases built in. Does anyone still train GANs? Is that not even useful if you have a LoRa that does what you want? How would
Someone
you
just
how would
someone
you
just wrote a
compare?
someone just wrote a paper that GANs are going to make a comeback and sort of made a model that used more GAN infrastructure.
Mhm.
It's just different outputs or different approaches, right? Like I think the challenge that I see with diffusion models is that it's always at runtime doing inference. You have to do 30 steps, 50 steps, right? Whereas a GAN is like once a GAN is made, it's a latent space and you can almost operate real time on it now with the GPUs we have. But the downside is diversity is a challenge with GANs. Training a GAN tends to lead to collapses more frequently than with these diffusion models. So there's trade-offs between them. But I do hope I'm bullish on GANs making a comeback in the next couple of years. Whether it's the exact same sort of technique or whatever, we're still not sure about.
Last question. I'm thinking of maybe having my students do both and train a GAN and train a LoRa. Do you have a favorite GAN training regime right now, or is that not even on your radar?
I mean, I haven't used any in a long time. I mean, StyleGAN XL is probably the best looking model, but it also takes the most computation to actually generate to train a GAN. Like I was training StyleGAN XL for like a month at some points.
Oh, geez.
StyleGAN 2 is probably still the best for training and pretty fast. You can probably do it in like a day now.
Hmm.
Challenge is getting all that code to run on like modern machines is a nightmare. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the challenge with GANs today, and I don't even know if anyone is even doing GAN training on a platform anymore these days. Maybe GAN Breeder, maybe Joel's tool.
I was thinking of
That
Colab. I was thinking of Colab, Google Colab.
The problem with Colab is they always update their hardware. So they've got the latest hardware and the latest software, and that you can't really run old GAN code on new PyTorch or anything like that. So it's a big challenge. Like I basically can run it on my local machine because I haven't upgraded my local machine in 3 years. Or like I've like built little environments where it's like, yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
It
like
might not be worth the effort, to be honest. Yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi saying like I haven't heard that name in a long time. It's
Yeah.
yeah. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, I've used FAL AI before. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
How is that different from Eden, or what's the difference between them? Do you know?
Well, FAL offers more stuff.
Mm.
FAL also has their own API. I think the costs on FAL are probably a little bit higher. So actually, we just moved all of the company I work for, which is an AI company. We just moved all of our stuff over to FAL very
Oh.
recently, and I actually quite like it. It's just a little bit less. There's less of a GUI and like sort of that sort of thing for this process. But technically, a lot of the stuff we're going to show here would work the same for FAL. Honestly, the reason I was using Eden up until now was they gave you 90 free credits and now they've changed it to 20. So we had 90, we could do a lot with 90 credits. Now at 20, it's a little bit more of a limit. But yeah, FAL is great. Just a slightly different like sort of interface or like approach to tools and that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. Also, I just did a couple of generations of I had a screenshot of a guy playing piano, and it's a pretty desaturated. And the first one looks like mountains. I think I did maybe an image style on top of it. And then the second one was basically just like one color. Like it's just gray. So I'm like, I don't think I'm doing this right yet.
There's a lot of variation within the randomization process of this, which
Yeah.
again, I wish I'd known that people only got 20 credits because I might have used FAL instead or something, you know. Yeah, with more credits, you can kind of play more and kind of like dial in your settings. The
Mm.
reality is seeds have a huge impact in sort of like what the underlying image is, especially if you have a very high AI strength in your image to image tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is definitely something I've noticed a lot with this. And like I find FAL to be, or sorry, not FAL. I find Flux to be a little bit more chaotic than SDXL.
Mhm.
Partly because it's a bigger model, so therefore there's more variation in the potential outputs of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Does it also matter? Because like the image I uploaded is a still from a vintage video. So it's like quite low quality
I
grain.
So there's two things there. One, yeah, probably the grain is causing some issues, but not much. But also if it's black and white, I find these models really struggle with black and white or really desaturated stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
That's probably what
that's
I'm
a
running.
weird. I mean, you know, you have to remember that all this stuff is trained on like all of the stock image photo sites. So like it expects that very bright, colorful, very crisp sort of look.
Yeah.
And we feed it images that are kind of desaturated and that sort of thing. It definitely sometimes struggles with those.
Oh,
I've had a lot of issues with that because I do use a lot of like old 16
yeah.
millimeter video to guide
Yeah.
my stuff, and it also really struggles in those cases. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, so for anyone interested, FAL is another one of these. There's a couple of these companies. There's one called FAL and there's one called Replicate. And maybe people are even familiar with Hugging Face. Hugging Face is kind of more of the open source version of this. These companies kind of all operate in the sense that there's a ton of open source tools, and what they can do is they can make it very easy to interface with them. So Fall, for example, is pretty strongly working on like image and video tools. Replicate has like kind of everything. Replicate, let me log out of here. Let's see. Don't mean to dox my company and how much they spend a month on these tools. Let me go log out here. Where do I log out? Log out. Cool. If you go to explore for Replicate, you can kind of see that there's just like a ton of different open source models to play with. The thing about Replicate is they will charge you a certain amount per image generation, right? So like the cost of these is going to be, you know, 2 or 3 cents or 5 cents per image. They have a lot of video models, and the video models can get up to like 50 cents per video. It can get pretty expensive. But if you're just looking around and you want to play with stuff, there's a ton of these sort of tools. And if you're okay with spending, you know, $5 just playing around, Replicate and Fall are both pretty good. Fall is a little bit more enterprise or like business oriented in that it's much faster, but it's also a little bit more expensive. And Replicate has way more models on it. You'll see they also offer fine tuning and like what are called LoRa's. So like all these tools kind of offer like maybe more or less the same thing. Hugging Face is more of the open source version. It tends to be a little bit cheaper, but also a lot of stuff's broken. Like you might find a model that like someone made 3 months ago and you can't access it now because they turned it off or like this sort of thing. So Hugging Face is kind of like the wild, wild west of like there's a ton of stuff on there that's really cool, but the likelihood of you being able to use it in production is like pretty much a big challenge. So most people, like most AI companies who aren't doing their own inference and running their own hardware and stuff are usually using Replicator Fall. I mentioned my company just moved to Fall. It's a little bit faster. Also, to be honest, Fall has better support people, which is kind of the reason we moved to it. But in general, like for you as an average user, like each of these tools would work fine. As we'll find when we talk about animations, the challenge with the technique we're using for animation is we basically need to batch run this across 100 images, right? So like we turn a video into frames, then we want to run that same process across all these videos at one time. And the challenge is that like that gets quite expensive. And then like, you know, kind of play with that. So Erica, your question of are we find one image that we like? More than one is great. If you have multiple videos, if you find one image you like and you're kind of like, that's good, you might want to upload another screenshot from a different video and sort of see if you can continue to generate good images there. I assume with everyone having like free credits of only 20, like you only generate 10 images, so you might be stuck with one animation for today, which is probably fine. Because it also takes a little bit of time to run this stuff. So, and basically we're all like for the next step, we're all going to run off my account, which means we might hit a concurrency issue. I think Eden only allows me to run 5 things concurrently, which means all of us are going to kind of be stuck in a queue of like slowly generating images together. It'll be fine. It'll just take us like, instead of 20 minutes for an animation, it might take us like 45 to get all of our frames out. So just beware of that. But yeah, if you've got multiple images that you like we'll in like a couple minutes, we'll just go through the process of like pulling those parameters out and be able to utilize those in our animation process. How is everyone doing? Are you getting like terrible images? Are you able to find an image that you think is okay? Like what's sort of happening on your side?
I got some pretty interesting results from using the depth map control net at 1.1 and then
Oh, interesting.
a pretty long prompt
Yep.
that I got from ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I forgot the prompt conditioning should be higher with a long prompt, right?
Lower for a long prompt.
Oh,
I
whoops.
mean, all this stuff is a little bit like you guys gotta try it and find out what on average works for you. But thank you for bringing up ChatGPT. That's actually a great thing for anyone that's looking to trying to generate prompts. If you have a ChatGPT account or you have a Claude account, or if you have a Google account, you might be able to use Gemini. You can basically ask those LLMs, like just upload the image and say, like, how would you describe this image? And it will often come back with like a 4 or 5 sentence prompt that you can then use. And those generally work pretty well. Like, for example, I think most of us probably, if you have a Google account, you usually have access to Gemini, which you can then use to just sort of ask it a question. The downside of Gemini, as I've discovered, is at least the version on Gemini at google.com. If you upload an image of a person, it will reject it and be like, I don't describe images of people. Let me see if I can do this. Add file, add image. I think this will kind of reject this. So you're gonna say like something like describe this image in 100 words. I think this will kick this back to me, but let's see. Yeah. So basically, if you have images of people, you can't use Gemini. ChatGPT will be fine with telling you what an image looks like. And obviously here again, you could even get into like some prompt engineering by asking for specific details. You know, have it tell you like all the different structures of this thing, but you'll see like, you know, ChatGPT gives you back like four paragraphs. That's probably too much for what you need. But you can kind of like take just even this first paragraph and we can put that into Flux. Now that's going to describe the image that I already gave it, right? So like you might want to upload a stylistic image. But actually, let's do this. Let's upload the style image from this. So I've got this image. So let's upload this thing and say, describe this image's style in 50 words. Cool. So we can use that. It's a little bit longer, so we'll kind of turn the prompt conditioning down a little bit. Actually, want to turn, yeah, let's leave it around 3. And we'll hit create. Claude will do the same thing for you. Any LLM. There are also some open source LLMs, although there are not as many that are easy to access these days. They've all kind of Let me think about, does Hugging Face have like Quen?
If you're interested in open source LLMs, I recently learned about llama files, which
Yeah.
are self-standing LLMs that you can download and execute on your own computer.
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
them are some of them are like huge, and some of them are tiny.
Yeah. There's a lot of different LLMs that are out there. I was trying to see if I could find one that had like an like a, let's do Hugging Face Vision LLM.
You can run an LLM on a Raspberry Pi as well.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do. I was just trying to see if I could find like an easy website that people could upload stuff to. Hugging Face Spaces. Let's see if this person has any. Yeah, is there like a lot? Like, is lava available on Hugging Face Spaces? Go to space directly. Let's do. Yeah, it's a good one. Let's see if this one works. Cool. So people might be able to go with trying this one. So you can basically upload an image to it, and then it will provide a description of it. Unfortunately, I don't see anywhere I can like talk back to it. So you might be able to get some keywords out of this. It's funny, I pay for so many of these LLM services. I don't even think about what open source ones are available to us now. There are a lot that if you have like local hardware, you can download and run locally. Like there's one called Olama, which allows you to download these directly to your computer and run them locally. I don't have any of them set up because I usually just use ChatGPT or Claude depending on my use, or Gemini depending on my usage. So, but you can use any of these tools to sort of talk to them and like, upload an image and say like, describe this image for me. Maybe give you less detail, more detail, like that sort of thing. And you can plug those into Flux. That is a weird looking image. My control net strength might be too high.
And you're limited to one control net. You can't use multiple.
Not for Eden. We can look at that next week when we get to Comfy, where we can kind of do all sorts of crazy things. We can combine all sorts of stuff. And it's basically just how long do you want to wait for your image to generate. The challenge with any of these tools is like the more layers you add in terms of models, the more you're just waiting for them to all run. So, you could add, a couple LoRa's, a couple of control nets, an IP adapter, and basically you would just sit there and wait 5 minutes for your image to generate, but it would work. So just kind of that trade-off between speed and efficiency or efficacy, I guess.
I see.
All right, that's a weird one.
Hey Derek, do you know if in Eden, if you reference people, will it pick up on that?
I think it should.
I'm
Whether or
not
not,
seeing it so much, whereas if I use SD 1.5, it's generally
yeah,
pretty good.
SD 1.5 loves stealing from artists and people's names. So like those work really well. But yeah, with Flux, I think they've done a little bit of a job of sort of removing some of that stuff. So it is
I
kind
think
of,
of it almost more for like casting. Like I'll usually like
Oh, yeah.
combine 3 people until they're not one person.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Cool. So I'm just going to generate one more image and I'll just pick from my favorites. They're always changing stuff on Eden. Like literally it used to be 90 credits. I used to be able to run a Python API that was lovely because I love writing Python. Now it's all Node stuff, which I do not write JavaScript very well. So that was a bit of a challenge for me this week, was getting everything written in Node for this class. So the joy of any technology is that it's always ever changing these days. All right, so while we wait for this last image to generate, let me show you sort of what we're going to do today, or what we're going to do for the second half of this class. Figure out all my stuff here. So I have written a collab notebook that walks us through our steps. I think everyone should be able to open this. It doesn't require us to use a GPU, so I think everyone should be able to play with it without getting kicked off. If you do get kicked off, let me know and we can do something together where I can set some stuff up for you. But essentially one of the challenges with this is, right, so we made one image. And there's a lot of tools, right? Like there's Midjourney, there's all these tools that basically allow you to do one image at a time. No one anymore really supports allowing you to upload a series of images to create a video. Like that's sort of all gone. Oh, if you don't have access to it, let me figure out what's going on there. Share. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Okay, let me change the access setup here. So copy link, try that one more time. Everyone should have access to it now. Sorry about that. Cool, great. Okay. So nobody really allows you to do batch image processing anymore. I don't know why. Seems like it'd be a pretty good use case of people's time, but like for a reason, like most of these tools are not built for that. They're built to just generate an image. So we're going to use instead is this API. So one of the things I like about Eden is they have this API tool. I used to like it a lot more. Now it's a little bit more annoying. But basically, like what we can do is we can talk to Eden via API and send everything we want via just a text script. And then it will come back with the image. We can download the image. We can then save all those images to our Google Drive account, and then we can turn that into a video. Whereas before, and I've done this in the past, is you would have to go through this process, upload every frame one by one, run your process here in this UI, and then download each image in the right order, sequence them all back together. It's just a whole pain in the ass. It's not worth it. So the tool that I've written in this notebook now will basically just like do all that process for us, and will just give us back all the images in the right order, and then we just need to convert that back into a video. So that's what we're going to look at today. Next week, we'll look at using Comfy UI to basically do the same thing. And imagine we might find Comfy UI to be a little bit easier to use. If you like Comfy, if you don't, then you still might find this process like kind of helpful. And again, Alex brought File or Replicate, like all those tools do have APIs, and you could do the similar thing with those tools as long as you learn to use their API. Because this isn't a coding class, I basically made this as simple as I think I could make it for everyone. So you don't need to write code, you don't need to edit anything. You're just like putting in values that we're going to pull directly from Flux or from Eden. So let's walk through just like getting this set up. So the first thing we're going to do, let me restart my machine so I can start from the same level you guys are at. Okay. So first thing we're going to do in this first cell is we'll just run this cell. So you just hit play here. And I assume everyone has a Google account. If not, you can actually skip this step because you don't really need it. I'm going to connect to Google Drive. The only reason I find this helpful is I can save my files directly back to my Drive account. And then if I like turn off this collab notebook, I won't lose anything. But if you don't have a Google account, I guess you couldn't get into this. I don't know. Basically, if you don't want to save stuff to Google Drive, just skip this step. Next thing is we want to install Node. Running Node through a Colab notebook is apparently like not something that is common. So I've set up these four things or three things here. So you just hit the play button. So underneath install Node, just hit play. Under install required node files, you'll hit the play button here. And under test node, you'll hit the play button here. And you can just hit play in the right order and they'll just like basically like process one by one. If for whatever reason you are interested in the code that's being run here, you can click on the little twirly guys here and open this and you'll see the code being run. You don't need to worry about it. I've triple checked that this works. So it should work for everybody. So, and on my side, this one has stopped running. You'll see it. There's no longer a little outline on it. Now this one and now this one. If all three of these no longer have the sort of spinning around the play button, that means it should work. The best way to double check this is if we come over here and click on the file folder. We should see in this section, we'll see some things that say Eden node. We'll see a folder called test. And if I open this test folder, there should be an image in there called test image. That just means that everything's working the way I expect it to. Is anyone not seeing any of that? I'll take silence as we're in a good spot. Just DM me if you are running into issues or put in the chat. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take a video, again, that 5 or 10-second video that we have, and we want to convert that into individual frames. So the way to do that is we're going to upload our video into Colab. So the easiest way to do that is just to, from your desktop, just find your video file. So I've got my video file here. And just drag that into this left-hand column in Colab. Just drop that in there. And hopefully your videos are small enough that it's like not going to take 20 minutes to upload this. Again, 5 to 10-second video should be pretty easy to upload. Mine is now uploaded. So in this cell here, don't worry about the code. All you need to worry about are these 3 fields here. So we have our input video path. So what we're going to do is we're going to hover over our video. We're going to right click on this and we're going to say copy path. We're then just going to double click into the cell so all this is selected. We're going to paste that video path in. And then we want to create an output folder of this. What I generally recommend you do is just take the name of your file like this and paste that in here and then add a backslash. All that's going to do is make a folder in this section here with that file name or with that folder name. And then it's going to generate all of the frames. And we've talked about frame rate before. I would generally recommend 6 to 8 as your frame rate. You can maybe go a little bit higher as 10 or 12 if you really want to, but maybe for simplicity and to not generate an insane amount of frames, put around 8. Once you have these 3 sections or these 3 inputs filled out, we'll just come over here and hit play on this button. And you'll see that that made a folder with the same name as my video file. And if I open this folder, you'll see in here, there are a bunch of images. So in my case, there are 42 images. Yours should be between 40 and 100, depending on how long your video is. Yep. Everyone at that point? Not yet. Okay. Just give me a thumbs up when we're ready to move on.
Sorry, Derek. It cut out earlier. I got the input video file path copied over from the video that I brought in from Drive. The
Okay.
output folder, do we need to change that or?
Yeah, I would basically just say take your video input your input path and then paste the same thing, like basically remove the extension and just paste that in.
Remove the extension and paste the video in, or 5S
Yeah, just
HR.
copy this and just remove the extension so that you basically have the same file name
Oh, I see. Okay.
and the folder path. Yeah, if you some of your opening like or bring in like ProRes video or something, it might be like too crazy and too big of a file, and it will take a little bit of time to upload. I'll go through this again, but I just want to keep moving on so that some folks can start to generate their videos. So then maybe the next group can generate their videos after they're finished, because this does take a little bit of time to actually generate all your video frames. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've done this. If you haven't, I'll come back to those folks. So you should have a folder of video frames. And if you click in here, you should see like your video frames one by one. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is I'm gonna skip over this section. So did anyone actually play with adding a style image in Flux in Eden?
I
Okay,
did, but it failed miserably.
okay, yeah. So I don't think this one works very well. If anyone did do this, I can go over those steps with you here, but like for now, I'm gonna skip this because I don't think that tool works very well. So if you wanted to upload your image to Eden for that style image use, you could do that. Instead, let's do this. Let's click this little arrow here and just close that. Okay, so now we want to basically like take all of our parameters from our Eden image we like and then copy them over. But first, we're going to need to run this cell. This just creates a little script for us to do this effect, essentially. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play here. That's just going to generate a file, which we don't need to really worry about. What we really want to worry about is this section here. So you'll see in this section, we have a bunch of parameters to put in. The ones we want to put in are our input folder. So this is the folder to all of our frames. So in this case, my folder is named this. So I'm going to copy and paste that in. Last thing is make sure you add the backslash to the end of, or the forward slash to the end of this. If you don't do that, I think we might get errors. I hope not. I hope I wrote the code to be better than that, but you never know. We're going to create an output folder, which is where we're going to save all the images that we generate through Eden. So I'm just going to call this video out. Just FYI, this /content is this folder here. If you don't put /content, it might go somewhere kind of crazy and we have to track it down. So in general, /content is probably the best place to put this. Now we're going to go over to Eden. As long as we have these two inputs in here that kind of relate to our file path here, we're going to go back to Eden. I'm going to pick out like my favorite image from this. None of these particularly looked great, but let's choose this one. This one at least got me some shiny stuff from it. So what I'm going to do is at the bottom here in the bottom right, I'm going to click on the ellipses menu and I'm going to go to view details. This is going to pull up my image as well as sort of here is we're using Flux Dev. Beneath this is the prompts. And then if we see here, there's a section called parameters. And if we click on this, we see a whole bunch of values of basically how we generate our image. Now we're going to go through this one by one and copy and paste these over. But just know like all the parameters you need are here. I probably didn't do the best name of like matching names to names. So I might just need to like walk you through that part. But let's start by grabbing the prompt. So the easiest way to grab the prompt is this little 2 squares button here is going to copy it. So if you click on this, that'll copy your prompt. Let's go back over to Colab. You'll see there's this prompt field. You can just paste the prompt into that field. We'll come back over to Eden. And with the next field we want is what's called denoise strength. Now, Eden calls that AI strength, I believe. Oh, even Eden is bad at this. So Eden calls it denoise is the parameter. If you just click on the value, so in this case it says 0.85, it'll copy it. And then you'll come back over here. You'll paste that value in. For control net, you have shit, I realized I didn't add all the options. So right now, this only supports canny or depth. If you used one of the other options, just drop me a note in chat and I will add that option in like 5 minutes. Just gonna take me a little bit of time to add them because I have to do some like annoying shit to map this from Eden stuff to this stuff. But for now, if you used canny or depth, you should be good to go. So I think I used, so you'll see those preprocessors like are these crazy names. But this one says depth. So I know this one is using the depth processor. So if I come back over here, I can select depth as my option. So there's none, which is like no control nets whatsoever. There's canny and there's depth. And I will add the other ones in like a couple minutes. We've got the control net strength. So I come back over to Eden and you'll see control net strength. So if I click on this value, we'll copy it. Come back over here, paste that in. I am not going to use the style image stuff, so just leave this blank. If you leave the style image path blank, it just means it knows not to use it. So you can skip that. So we also don't need the style image strength as long as this is empty, so it doesn't really matter what this value is. The last two values are probably the most important, so make sure you grab those. So in this case, the seed value is all the way at the bottom here. You'll see there's a seed value. Basically, what this is going to ensure that we do is we get the same noise every time we generate our animation, which will hopefully give me this kind of glowy, glassy effect. So again, just copy this value by clicking on it. Come back over here and paste this in. And then our flux guidance value is flux guidance down here. Click on that and copy it over. That's a 3. So just double check to make sure you have your path set up correctly, because at this point, when you hit play, this is going to start running. And basically, like this will run through all of the images in this folder. So in my case, I have 42 images. It's going to run through each one by one and save them out to a new folder called video out. Now, this process is not fast. In my experience, when I've been testing this week, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to generate a 42 frame animation, which is pretty slow. As all of us use this on my same API, we might find it's even slower, but let's kind of see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and play here and let's let this run. And the good news is hopefully this will finish by the end of class. We can do the last step. But for anyone else that is at this point and has everything set up, go ahead and hit play as well. And we'll just start generating images. And what will happen is, as you go down here, you'll see what is happening is there's a couple of tricks to this, which is that like in order to pass an image to Eden, it needs to be uploaded to a public URL, meaning all the files in Drive are not public URLs. So I've written a script that basically uploads it to Eden, so Eden has access to it. Then you pass all of the parameters to the image, and then it does the processing. And that processing takes 30 seconds, a minute itself. So what we're doing is we're waiting for all of the processing to finish. And then what will happen is there'll be some note that says we're going to download the image. So this is going to happen for 42 frames, which is not the fastest process, unfortunately. So here we go. We got one image. So if I check now, over here, I see there's a new folder called video out. And if I open this, you'll see my first image is complete. So I'm going to hope that it doesn't take 40 minutes to do the rest of these. We'll see. Is anyone else at this step and running there? Cool. Okay. For everyone that's not doing this, are you guys stuck anywhere? Can I help with anything? Yeah, you're stuck. What can I help with?
I feel really dumb.
No,
Question.
no, don't feel dumb at all.
I think, I don't know, just mostly I got lost just trying to make a good image, but I'm like,
Yes.
what are we doing? So we're taking a video we already had, and how are we using the images from Flux in this
Yeah, so what we're
context?
doing is we're taking our guiding video, right? Which I now understand your question a little bit better of like, should we be using a video that we've already made or a live animation video? It might be better to use like a live animation video, like just go on a stock video site and use one of those.
Mhm.
We are basically taking that video and kind of like styling over top of it. So it's kind of like rotoscoping. We're kind of
Okay.
adding something over top of that.
So what we were doing in Eden was almost creating like the style frame to
Yeah,
then put over another
exactly.
video.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then I'm totally lost with Collab for whatever reason. I'm like,
That's
wait, I
fine.
have
No,
to connect my account. Am I giving it all my data? What's the
no. You're not giving it any data. Trust me, Google doesn't care about anything that's outside Google Drive. Uh, yeah. So let me walk through at the very top again. How this work. And again, you can actually skip the step of connecting to Google Drive. Like you don't really need to do that here. Um, for a lot of processes, I'm generating like thousands of video frames. So I'll often just save them directly to Drive so that if Colab eventually shuts off, all that work is saved. In this case, we're working with really short videos, like it's just going to save it here and hopefully like you don't get disconnected or anything. So the process would be kind of fine to just skip Drive completely. And then from there, like all that Colab really is like a way to run code without having to be in a terminal to run it
terminal?
separately. Yeah. So like
Okay.
this just like you can even look and see all the code I'm actually running. But if you close these, you can just run these three in parallel, just hit play, play, play. That's just going to install all the system stuff we need in order to make this work.
So I started there, but it wasn't then giving me the test folder.
Interesting.
So that's when I went back and tried to do the first step.
Okay. If you come up here and hit this refresh button, see if that generates a test folder for you.
I now have a test folder, but I had it when I tried to connect my Google.
Okay.
But now I have
Yeah.
an explain error because I didn't finish the Google step.
Oh yeah, just you can skip that and ignore it. The other thing
Okay.
is like the thing I should mention for collab is if you want to clear all of the crap that gets spit out below it, if you click on this little code cell output actions here, you can then say clear selected outputs and it's just going to clear it. So you can like don't have to see the error message or the red color or anything.
Where's that? Oh, clear selected outputs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a test folder and I clicked all the other buttons.
Cool. So then we want to come down to the convert video to frame. So this is where you want to upload your video, just drag your video into this left-hand panel here and it'll upload.
Just drag it in there and I
Yeah.
don't need, okay.
Yeah. You don't need to worry about Google Drive. It's like one of those things I always add to every one of my notebooks. And then I'm like, wait, most people don't need this except me because I'm crazy. So yeah, sorry. I confuse people sometimes by talking about that section.
All good. Now I'm going to find a different video.
Yeah.
Derek, I'm figured out the first export step within Colab, but for some reason after I put all the Eden info in and ran, I'm running into an issue where it says module not found for the code.
Okay.
Error cannot find module.
Make sure you run this cell, the one right under customizer output file.
Customized, yeah.
Yep.
I missed that step.
Yep. Sorry. I know it's always like it's very easy to skip steps in Colab, and then you're like, wait, what broke? And then you just have to go back and kind of figure out if you if you skipped a step.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, I got a movie in.
Okay, cool. So you have a movie uploaded here into the files.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, great. So then what you're going to do is you're going to come back up to the section that reads convert video to frames.
Yes.
You're going to right click on your video file and do copy path. And then you're going to come over here to input video and you're going to like basically select everything in there and just replace it with your path by pasting it in.
I'm going to put it in the input video.
Yep.
Yep.
And then for output folder, usually what I recommend is just copy the entire path of your input video at minus the extension. And then paste that in for output folder and then just add the slash at the end.
Okay.
And then I would leave FPS at 8. This is probably the best value to start with. Once you've got all that in there, then you're just going to want to come over to this play button and hit play. And after maybe 10 seconds, depending on how long your video is, you should, over in the side of your files, now see a folder with the name of your video file. Cool. And if you
Roger.
open that, you should see just a number of numbered PNG files.
So it's converting them to still frames.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Because Flux or Eden's tool, Flux tool only takes images in, we have to feed it each image one by one. Be nice if they had like a video to frames tool where they could do that work for you, but they don't. So we have to kind of like force it or like make all the steps ourselves.
Got it. So it's deconstructing the video more
Yep.
or less.
Yep.
And now we're going to reconstruct it with the style.
Exactly. So once we've done this step, then we're going to skip the upload image to Eden because that style image thing is crap. So we're going to skip this. Under customize our output file, we want to hit play on this cell to generate the script we want to run. So hit play. It should take less than a second to run. You should have a green check mark next to it.
Is it weird if it says it took 0 seconds?
That's fine. It
Okay.
literally should take almost no time. So that's fine. Yep. And then we just want to go in and grab all the parameters from our file. So to start with, we can take the input folder. The input folder is the video frames, essentially. Just copy, again, right click on your folder with all the frames in it. Just go to copy.
Sorry.
Good.
I'm not seeing the same folder, what you have on the right side there with the input,
over here?
output, prompt. Yeah,
What do you see? Just this?
I just see input folder, output file, and frame rate.
Oh, scroll down a little bit further.
There's nothing else.
So underneath customize our output folder file, underneath there,
Oh, okay. Yes.
all the way at the bottom. Yeah, sorry. Long section.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep, cool. Yeah. So then what we're going to want to do is we'll copy our input folder path. So this is where all the video files are. So just right click on that folder path and go to copy path. You'll come over to input folder and then paste that path in. I think we want to add the slash in there just to be safe. You there?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then for output folder, this is just where we're going to save all of our Eden images. I would probably just use /content/video -out. It's a little bit easier if we all use the same thing. So you can just use that.
Okay.
And then we just want to bounce between Eden and copy a bunch of our parameters. So the first thing we want to copy over is the prompts. So we'll come over here to prompts. So basically when you're in Eden, find one of the images you like. Mine's probably long gone. Let me scroll down for a little bit. So let's just say I like this image. So if you right click or if you click on the bottom little thing here, the little ellipses menu and go to view details, that'll pull up this panel that has the image and then a bunch of stuff on the right hand side. And if you click on the section that says parameters, that's going to give us all of the values that we use to make that image. And then we're just going to kind of toggle between the two screens. So the first thing we're going to copy is the prompt. So if you come over to prompt and you hit the little 2 squares here, hit copy, and then come over to the Colab notebook, you'll see the prompt section. You can just select everything in there and then hit paste to paste in that entire prompt. And then for denoise strength, we'll come back to Eden. We'll scroll through the parameters to see the denoise value. And you can just click on the number and it'll automatically copy that for you. Come back over here, paste in that value. For control nets, if you used one, right now I'm only supporting canny and depth, but I can add other ones.
I ended up turning it off.
Okay, then just you can set it to none and that
None?
works. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then should I do a control net?
It doesn't matter for the strength. If you're turning it off, this value is going to be ignored, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
You can just leave that
Okay.
empty. Style image path. I assume you didn't use a style image.
No, but I did still refer to an initial image. Does that not matter if we have the
No,
seed?
this is that style image section.
Okay, yeah, no.
The init image we'll do, that's actually the video stuff, so we're going to use that. So you can leave the style image path empty. And then the same thing, this gets ignored, so doesn't really matter what you put in there. So the last two values we need are the seed and the flux guidance. So in Eden, if you go back to Eden thing, scroll down to the parameters, you'll see the seed value is here.
Mhm.
So just click on the seed number and then come back over here and paste that in. And the last thing we need is the guidance value. So that is, whoa, I just lost that guy. So that's at the very bottom of our parameters for Flux guidance. So again, just click on the value that copies it, come back over here and paste that in.
Okay.
Cool. And as long as you've got all that stuff set up, then you can just come over here to the left-hand button. Yours should be a play button. Mine's like basically already processing. Just go ahead and play, and it should run.
So it doesn't need to know the original image to image reference if it's kind of baked into the seed.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, because you have all these other parameters and your image, I would assume, is very similar to the input image you fed it to play with. Then it's just going to use all those values. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so now we just wait. So class is almost over, and I'm sure some of you might just want to hang out and wait for your video to finish. It might take us a little bit of time just because we're all basically using my program, which means we might just have some very slow generations across all of us doing this all at once. But the last step for us is to convert our files to video. And again, this is just going to be 3 different attributes we want to put in here. So the first is our input folder. So basically you can set this up to run already while we wait. So I assume for many of you use the same folder output name as I did, which is video out. So we're just going to come over here and we're going to right click on the video out folder, hit copy path. We'll put that in for the input folder. And then for our output file, just give this a name. So keep the /content/ and just give your video a name, whatever is going to be easier for you to remember. So I'll just call mine week 3 demo and leave .mov. This makes a ProRes video, so it's going to be pretty high quality. So you need to use the .mov extension instead of a .mp4 or anything else. And then because we output our video at 8 frames per second, we want to input our video back to 8 frames a second. So you can set the frame rate to 8. If you change that value, just make it match between the two. And then what we can do is we can hit play here, and basically this will just queue up, and whenever that top cell, the cell above it, is finished running, this next one will run and just generate our video. But for some of us, this might take a while. Like I ran this starting 15 minutes ago, and it's only a third of the way through this. So because we're all journeying on top of the same account, there's some blocking limits on this. So it might just take a little while, but when this is done, when this cell is finished and you have a little green check mark next to it, you should see over here in your files a video file named this. So whatever you named your file, you'll see that video file there. You can then just right click on that file and go download, and it will download that video file for you. Now, the other thing I'm going to add here, just in case you want them, I'm going to add a little cell here below. And I'll share this. I'll copy and paste this into the chat for anyone that's interested. The other thing you might want is a zip of all of those images. So the way to do that is, do I remember the order for the zip command? I believe it's a file name. So let's call it zipped images.zip and then the path. So I believe if you all just make a new cell, the way to make a new cell is to sort of hover over the end here and add a code cell. Sorry, I should have done this before we started, so people don't have to worry about coding stuff. If you make a new code cell, you can then, I'll paste this in our chat. You can copy that entire path and just paste that into a new cell. And I assume if you have a different output folder, like if you didn't call it video out, you'll need to change the name of this. But if you use the same name that I did, you can just leave that as is. When we run this cell, what'll happen is it'll create a zipped file called zippedimages.zip. It'll put it over here, and you can download that file as well. And basically that'll be your individual frames if for whatever reason you wanted to resequence them or you wanted the high res version, like those sort of things. I'm just going to double check to make sure I have the order for that correct. What did I do there? Zip dash. Oh. Yeah, okay, that's the right order. Cool. So basically when your whole process is done, you'll have a video file and you'll also have this like zipped images.zip. You can download both of those. And that will basically give you your ProRes video animation as well as your zipped file of zipped images. What I'm gonna do for everyone is basically I have, how many credits do I have left? So I have 7,800 credits for basically us to use as a group. So basically, like you can just run these. If you want to run an animation this week, please feel free to just play with stuff and like generate your own animation. You can use my credits to generate your animations until I run out of credits, which might take a little while, might take a long while, just depending on how many people run it. What I will also do this week is I'll create a little tutorial on if you like this process and you want to do more of it yourself, and I've run out of credits, what you'll need to do is you'll need to create an account or like pay for an account yourself on Eden. And then there is a settings here to get API keys. So I'll go through the process of getting you an API key to put in yourself, and like you'll need to make one edit to the notebook so you can add your own API credits or basically use your own API to run this. But basically with the 12 of us here, I don't necessarily expect us to burn through all those credits. If we do, great. But if not, you can probably likely use this process for the next week without needing to pay for it.
Can I ask a question, Derek?
Yeah, please, of course.
How do I download the series of images that I created in the first step? Is there a way to like right click on the folder and download or something?
Yeah, there's no easy way in Colab. What we can do is if you want just this, your video output, right? Your video frames.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so the way to do that is basically to take this command.
Oh, okay.
So I'll add this. Let me add this, and what I'll do is I'll send everyone this notebook again with these changes in case you want the latest version. So let's say we'll call this original frames, and then the path to your outputs. So actually, I could probably do something fancy here. What did I call this folder? I overrode variables, so I can't do that. Okay, so basically, what'll happen is you'll just want to put in your path to your original frames. Let's do this. Let me make a little change here. I will make this a little bit easier for everyone. So for this, So this will be kind of a reusable option here. So basically what you'll do is if you download your frames from your final video, you'll just click on whatever folder you have named for your final video out. You'll copy the path from this and you'll paste that in here. And then if you want your original video, frames from your original video, you will copy from whatever your original video folder is and put that path in here. And then when you run either of these cells, that'll basically download those files for you. So I'll reshare this tonight with this in mind. So basically you can reopen this at a later date and be able to run this process.
Should we refresh to get access to
I
those
wouldn't,
lines?
you could refresh, but if you're already running a process that like introduces some weird like basically you'll be stuck using this and some of your variables might get renamed and stuff. So I would wait until your video file is done. And then I'll share this with everyone so that you can then use this tool. But yeah, for now, yeah. The other thing is if you did connect to your Google Drive account, at the very first step, the other thing you can do is you now have a Drive folder in here. And if you open that, you will see there's a folder in here called My Drive. If you drag any of these files folders into here, that'll basically drag it into your Drive account and then it'll be synced with your Drive account. Now, if you do that in the middle of a process, like if you were to take your video output folder and drag that in there, it would basically break our current system. So wait until everything's done before you start dragging stuff around. But that's kind of the beauty of this collab and Drive thing is like it's easy to move files in and out of Drive to connect with stuff. But yeah, it's a little bit of a learning curve with all this collab stuff. Cool. So I'm happy to hang out for a little bit while people finish their videos. But if anyone is like ready to call it a night or like wants to try this again tomorrow, like please feel free. And then again, we will have Q&A time on Thursday. So if you're running this process or you want to just watch the video tonight and want to try it again tomorrow, like that's totally fine. And I'm happy to help answer any questions or any issues that people run into this week around this process. Kind of bummed that Eden changed their amount of free credits people have because 90 credits would have been very easy for us to like dial in our settings. But if you are like, hey, I want to play with Eden a little bit more, but I would love to like just generate more frames and I don't want to pay, like just hit me up and we can like do a quick Zoom session. I'm happy to like set up stuff on my side for you. I would give people my login and password, but unfortunately I connected via my single sign-on with Google as I always do. And then I feel burned by that. But yeah, I'm happy to like help people out with some credits. So yeah, if you are interested in the process and just like struggle with tonight, which I know was definitely a lot, like just hit me up and I'm happy to set up more time for us to walk through it together. Cool.
Derek,
So next, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
No. You finish up. I got
Okay, cool. Yeah. Next week we're going to do more or less the same process inside of a tool called Comfy UI. Some of you will find Comfy UI much easier because it is sort of a visual tool. Others of you will probably find it even crazier and more annoying, in which case you might come back to this and be like, I actually really like this process now. But again, we'll sort of walk through that process. Yeah, if you like node editors, you're going to love Comfy UI. Again, I will come in with pre-built workflows for us. So you won't have to like understand how it all works. But we'll sort of break down the process of how those nodes work and how Comfy UI works. But yeah, I appreciate, like, I know this was not the easiest setup for this week, especially because we didn't have as many credits as I would have liked. But yeah, I'm happy to keep talking with people about this process. And obviously I think Comfy UI will be more interesting to some of you. Cool. All right, that's it for this week. I'm happy to hang out if people just want to generate their videos. I can also answer any other questions you have. But I will hit stop record.
Yeah, stop record, yeah.
Cool.
Derek, I'll keep this quick.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm retracing your